Chapter 375. Separate paths. Sonny smiled and leaned back on his chair, then looked at his friends with curiosity. There was a question he really wanted to ask, but tried not to up until now. What's your second ability anyway? His words hung in the air for a few moments. Suddenly, Ka coughed with embarrassment and looked away. After a couple of seconds, he said in a strange tone, I can see really far now when I want to, even when there's no light. I am also supposed to be able to see through illusions and all forms of obfuscation, whatever that means. And I can also see through objects. Sonny and Uffa stared at him and asked almost simultaneously. Like through walls. Like through clothes. Ka hid behind his glass, lingered for a bit, and then answered in a small voice. Yes, but I would never. While Sonny tried to imagine why would Ka refuse to look through walls, Uffa laughed out loud. I see, what a great ability. She shook her head, then turned to Sonny and asked, Hey doofus, I bet you often wanted to stab me with something sharp. Wanna try? He frowned in confusion, then raised an eyebrow. No, why would I stab you? Uffa looked at him with expectation clearly written on her face, then sighed in disappointment when he didn't move. Ah, that's a shame. I wanted to demonstrate my second ability to you. Basically, it makes my whole body invulnerable. Well, comparatively, of course. Skin of steel, that sort of deal. A very sweet comprehensive defense boost, if I do say so myself. Sonny blinked and looked at the gaunt young woman with a bit of awe. Indeed, that was a very powerful ability. Combined with Uffa's previous one, it turned her into an exceedingly formidable presence on the battlefield, as if she had not been a real menace already. Uffa glanced at him and asked curiously, Well, what about you? He shifted slightly. A very neat type of conditional short-distance teleportation. Ka can see through walls, I can go through walls, while you can just plow through them, I guess, in your usual barbarous fashion. Uffa grinned. Plowing, interesting choice of words, I wonder if. Sonny hurriedly changed the subject. So, what are your plans, guys? What citadels are you going to? His sudden question changed the mood of the conversation. For a while, a strange silence settled among them. All three had contemplative, wistful expressions on their faces. This situation was inevitable, really, but they tried to avoid the discussion for as long as possible, mostly because it was both slightly awkward and slightly sad. Back on the forgotten shore, the three of them had forged a bond, and now, depending on their choices, that bond would most likely either weaken or break. The future was going to lead each on their own path, perhaps in opposite directions. For better or worse, they were about to go their separate ways. Perhaps fate would bring them together again, one day, or perhaps not. After a while, Uffa sighed. I don't know, really. I have received invitations from both Clan Valor and Clan Song, but you know me. I don't do well with authority. Plus, none of them have moved a finger to help me when I really needed it. Only now that I am a hot commodity are they all suddenly kind and friendly. Rubs me the wrong way, to be honest. She looked at her wheelchair, then slumped in it tiredly. Anyway, I might take them up on the offer, or I might not. It depends on what the fastest way to get ready for the second nightmare would be. Maybe I'll have a better chance of becoming a master soon if I stay independent and don't have to compete against the actual heirs for resources and attention. After the second nightmare, one spiritual body became their physical body. Reaching the rank of a master would free Uffa from her terrible disability, so Sonny understood her motivation perfectly. Now he knew why she had said that for her. Striving to conquer the second nightmare was the only way. Funnily enough, through no wish of his own, Sonny had ended up in a similar situation. Ka remained silent for a few moments, then he too sighed. As for me, my agency has secured me a very good position in Bastion, so I'll be going there soon. I won't have to fight another nightmare creature for a long, long time, I guess. Maybe even never. For someone who was speaking about being safe and comfortable for the rest of his life, he didn't sound too happy. There was a note of reluctance in his voice, even shame. Sonny frowned. You dropped that tone immediately, Ka. There's nothing wrong with living like a person should, not having to worry about being eaten every goddamn day. Don't even think about feeling bad about it. Got it? The charming young man smiled sadly and nodded. I do, please forgive my ungratefulness. But what about you, Sonny? Sonny scratched the back of his head, then shrugged. Well, I am rich now. You won't believe it, guys, but as it turns out, scribbling a few words about the things you see in the dream realm can actually earn you money. And I think I can weasel my way into receiving a salary from the academy as a research assistant, whatever that means. So, actually, I haven't decided on a particular citadel yet. But I can pick pretty much any of them, since the government is being very friendly. Both Uffa and Ka stared at him with incredulous expressions, clearly trying to imagine Sonny as an academic or even an instructor. Then, both shook their heads simultaneously. Can't imagine. Yeah, sounds wrong. About the citadels, though. So which one are you going to choose? He thought for a bit, then shrugged. Don't know yet, but I can tell you a secret, something that very few people know or think about. A very wise man told me to base my choice on it. Sonny lingered for a moment, then said seriously. Plumbing. The secret to a happy life is to find a citadel with great plumbing. Soon it was time to say goodbye. Their parting was both warm and bittersweet. After seeing Ka and Uffa off, Sonny lingered outside for a bit, and then returned to his room on one of the underground levels of the hospital complex. It was already evening, and his eyes were full of sand. With an irritated snarl, Sonny took one of the stimulant patches out of the pack and plastered it on his skin. Immediately, a cold fire flowed through his veins. His heart accelerated and his mind cleared. Sonny felt refreshed, energized, and ready to chew on mountains. Of course, there was a price to pay for such a boost. It would be inevitably followed by a debilitating crash of the same magnitude, unless he used another stimulant, that is, and then another, and another. Only with each new one, the duration of the effect would shorten, and the strain on his body would increase. If he was a mundane human, his heart would have probably exploded just from one of these unassuming patches. The government didn't joke around with its military tech. But he wasn't ready to make a decision just yet. He had to do a few more things. Like finally checking on his new memory, Sonny smiled and leaned back on his chair, then looked at his friends with curiosity. There was a question he really wanted to ask, but tried not to up until now. What's your second ability anyway? His words hung in the air for a few moments. Suddenly, Ka coughed with embarrassment and looked away. After a couple of seconds, he said in a strange tone, I can see really far now when I want to, even when there's no light. I am also supposed to be able to see through illusions and all forms of obfuscation, whatever that means. And I can also see through objects. Sonny and Uffa stared at him and asked almost simultaneously, like through walls, like through clothes. Ka hid behind his glass, lingered for a bit, and then answered in a small voice. Yes, but I would never. While Sonny tried to imagine why would Ka refuse to look through walls, Uffa laughed out loud. I see, what a great ability. She shook her head, then turned to Sonny and asked, Hey doofus, I bet you often wanted to stab me with something sharp. Wanna try? He frowned in confusion, then raised an eyebrow. No, why would I stab you? Uffa looked at him with expectation clearly written on her face, then sighed in disappointment when he didn't move. Ah, that's a shame. I wanted to demonstrate my second ability to you. Basically, it makes my whole body invulnerable. Well, comparatively, of course. Skin of steel, that sort of deal. A very sweet, comprehensive defense boost, if I do say so myself. Sonny blinked and looked at the gaunt young woman with a bit of awe. Indeed, that was a very powerful ability. Combined with Uffa's previous one, it turned her into an exceedingly formidable presence on the battlefield. As if she had not been a real menace already. Effie glanced at him and asked curiously, "Well, what about you?" He shifted slightly. A very neat type of conditional short-distance teleportation. Kai can see through walls, I can go through walls, while you can just plow through them, I guess. In your usual barbarous fashion. Effie grinned. Plowing, interesting choice of words, I wonder if. Sonny hurriedly changed the subject. So, what are your plans, guys? What citadels are you going to? His sudden question changed the mood of the conversation. For a while, a strange silence settled among them. All three had contemplative, wistful expressions on their faces. This situation was inevitable, really, but they tried to avoid the discussion for as long as possible, mostly because it was both slightly awkward and slightly sad. Back on the forgotten shore, the three of them had forged a bond, and now, depending on their choices, that bond would most likely either weaken or break. The future was going to lead each on their own path, perhaps in opposite directions. For better or worse, they were about to go their separate ways. Perhaps fate would bring them together again, one day, or perhaps not. After a while, Effie sighed. I don't know, really. I have received invitations from both Clan Valor and Clan Song, but you know me. I don't do well with authority. Plus, none of them have moved a finger to help me when I really needed it. Only now that I am a hot commodity are they all suddenly kind and friendly. Rubs me the wrong way, to be honest. She looked at her wheelchair, then slumped in it tiredly. Anyway, I might take them up on the offer, or I might not. It depends on what the fastest way to get ready for the second nightmare would be. Maybe I'll have a better chance of becoming a master soon if I stay independent and don't have to compete against the actual heirs for resources and attention. After the second nightmare, one's spiritual body became their physical body. Reaching the rank of a master would free Effie from her terrible disability, so Sonny understood her motivation perfectly. Now he knew why she had said that for her. Striving to conquer the second nightmare was the only way. Funnily enough, through no wish of his own, Sonny had ended up in a similar situation. Kai remained silent for a few moments, then he too sighed. As for me, my agency has secured me a very good position in Bastion, so I'll be going there soon. I won't have to fight another nightmare creature for a long, long time, I guess. Maybe even never. For someone who was speaking about being safe and comfortable for the rest of his life, he didn't sound too happy. There was a note of reluctance in his voice, even shame. Sonny frowned. You dropped that tone immediately, Kai. There's nothing wrong with living like a person should, not having to worry about being eaten every goddamn day. Don't even think about feeling bad about it. Got it? The charming young man smiled sadly and nodded. I do, please forgive my ungratefulness. But what about you, Sonny? Sonny scratched the back of his head, then shrugged. Well, I am rich now. You won't believe it, guys, but as it turns out, scribbling a few words about the things you see in the dream realm can actually earn you money. And I think I can weasel my way into receiving a salary from the academy as a research assistant, whatever that means. So, actually, I haven't decided on a particular citadel yet. But I can pick pretty much any of them, since the government is being very friendly. Both Effie and Kai stared at him with incredulous expressions, clearly trying to imagine Sonny as an academic or even an instructor. Then, both shook their heads simultaneously. Can't imagine. Yeah, sounds wrong. About the citadels, though. So which one are you going to choose? He thought for a bit, then shrugged. Don't know yet, but I can tell you a secret, something that very few people know or think about. A very wise man told me to base my choice on it. Sonny lingered for a moment, then said seriously, "Plumbing. The secret to a happy life is to find a citadel with great plumbing." Soon it was time to say goodbye. Their parting was both warm and bittersweet. After seeing Kai and Effie off, Sonny lingered outside for a bit, and then returned to his room on one of the underground levels of the hospital complex. It was already evening, and his eyes were full of sand. With an irritated snarl, Sonny took one of the stimulant patches out of the pack and plastered it on his skin. Immediately, a cold fire flowed through his veins. His heart accelerated and his mind cleared. Sonny felt refreshed, energized, and ready to chew on mountains. Of course, there was a price to pay for such a boost. It would be inevitably followed by a debilitating crash of the same magnitude, unless he used another stimulant, that is, and then another, and another. Only with each new one, the duration of the effect would shorten, and the strain on his body would increase. If he was a mundane human, his heart would have probably exploded just from one of these unassuming patches. The government didn't joke around with its military tech. But he wasn't ready to make a decision just yet. He had to do a few more things. Like finally checking on his new memory, summoning the runes, he glanced at a particular cluster. Memories: Silver Bell, Puppeteer's Shroud, Midnight Shard, Ordinary Rock, Prowling Thorn, Endless Spring, Blood Blossom, Dark Wing, Moonlight Shard, Unold, Weaver's Mask, Broken Oath. The last one, Broken Oath, came from the twisted simulacrum of one of the 7 ancient heroes of the Forgotten Shore, the Lord. Even though the coral golem had turned out to be just an awakened monster, Sonny had high hopes for this memory. But before he concentrated on it, Sonny stared at the rest of his arsenal. 1, 2, 3. 12. After a year of constant battles and bloodshed, he only had 12 memories. Of course, he would have had much more if not for the need to feed Saint. The taciturn creature demanded a vast amount of resources to get her to the 200 shadow fragments, which was one of his goals. If not for that, he would have made a real windfall. Sonny already considered himself wealthy thanks to the contribution points teacher Julius was going to arrange for him. But if he had a dozen or 2 extra memories to sell, well, he would have been not just wealthy, but extravagantly so. Enough to buy several houses, if he wished to. Maybe he still could sell some. Looking at his trusty weapons and tools, Sonny hesitated. Now that he could use Shadow Step to blink from one place to another, he didn't need to enhance his mobility that much. So, Prowling Thorn and Dark Wing were potential candidates to be auctioned off maybe. They still had their uses, though. The rest he couldn't even imagine selling, at least not before finding better alternatives. Even the Silver Bell, which wasn't really all that useful, but had something of a sentimental value. The little bell was the first memory he had ever received, after all, and its description was, sort of, it touched something in his heart. Curses, I just used the stimulant. Why is my mind so scattered? With a frown, Sonny finally concentrated on his new memory. Memory Broken Oath. Memory rank awakened. Memory tier I. Memory type charm. His eyes widened slightly. Jackpot. Another charm, such luck. Excited, Sonny read further. Memory description. They made a terrible oath to destroy the curse or be consumed by it. Those who have broken the oath were consumed by the curse, and those consumed by the curse have broken their oath. In the end, none could escape their promise. Morbid, I guess. I guess that's how the Carapace Legion was born. He looked at the next string of runes. Memory enchantments, Oathbreaker. Enchantment description. The broken oath erodes souls of all those who approach it. Sonny held his breath for a few moments. A soul attack. Both the nightmare creatures and the awakened had many ways to destroy their enemies. Kinetic damage, called physical for simplicity, was the most common, but there were many others. Among them, soul damage was the rarest and hardest to defend against. It was no coincidence that Soul Reaper Jet, whose aspect allowed her to strike directly at the soul, was so feared. And now, Sunny had a soul attack of his own in the arsenal. There was one problem, however. Weight erodes souls of all who come near. Will it affect me then as well? A deep scowl appeared on his face. Sunny hesitated for a while, then sighed, and summoned the memory into existence. Soon, a glistening gem made out of polished crimson coral appeared in his hand. A second later, he suddenly shuddered and groaned. As soon as the broken oath appeared, a sickening sensation permeated his entire being. It was as though someone was slowly draining the very life out of him. Not only that, but he also felt weaker. Looking down, Sunny saw his shadows ripple and react. The surly one stared at him with outrage and waved its hands in the air angrily, while the friendly one was hugging itself pitifully and packing. Damnation! He had recognized the debilitating feeling that the gem produced. It was the same aura that had weakened him when he fought the coral golem. It was also the infinitely weaker version of the annihilating soul attack of the artificial sun. Gritting his teeth, Sunny dismissed the broken oath. Only when it disappeared completely could he breathe freely again. Crap! That was one serious side effect. How was he supposed to use his new charm if it would be slowly killing not only his enemies, but also Sunny himself? Drop it on the ground, use Shadow Step to blink away, and hope for the best. Sunny sat quietly for a while thinking. Then, a tentative smile appeared on his face. Wait, that should work right. Turning away from the runes describing the soul-destroying gem, he concentrated on the description of his loyal shadow demon. Shadow Marble Saint. Shadow Rank Awakened. Shadow Class Demon. Shadow Attributes: Battle Master Stalwart Spark of Divinity. Shadow Abilities: Weapon Sage Underworld Armament. Shadow Fragments 80/200. Concentrating on the Underworld Armament ability, Sunny read. Shadow Saint's armor can accommodate a charm memory to inherit its enchantments. His smile widened. Good, that's the first part. Looking a bit higher, he found another string of runes. Attribute Stalwart. Attribute Description: The Stone Saint is highly resistant to all forms of damage, as well as being fully immune to mind and soul attacks. Fully immune to mind and soul attacks. Yes. Sunny let out a satisfied sigh. The broken oath was pretty useless by itself, but when combined with Saint's special ability and attributes, it would make his shadow even more lethal. That was because Saint was a very special kind of demon, one whose will couldn't be intruded upon or shaken. Both her mind and her soul, well, the shadow that inhabited her body instead of a soul, were utterly indomitable. He only had to make sure to not be anywhere near the living statue, while she had the crimson gem set into her armor. Tricky but doable. And speaking of armor, he was not done exploring his memories yet. In fact, he had left the best for last. Looking at the shimmering runes, Sunny concentrated on a particular string, one that looked broken and incomplete. Memory unrolled. Now that he was awakened, he could finally restore the broken onyx armor he had bought from Stev for a measly handful of soul shards. The ascended suit of armor of the 6th tier, the most powerful memory he owned. Or half seen, even well, except for the Weaver's mask, of course. Summoning the unold, Sunny strained his muscles and with some effort managed to place it on the floor in front of him. Even now that he was an awakened, the weight of the stone memory was not something he could endure easily without using both of his shadows or wasting essence to enhance his strength. Breathing a bit heavily, Sunny studied the damaged memory. The suit of ancient plate armor was jet black in color. Its design was intricate and solemn, radiating a feeling of dark resolve and stalwart, adamantine grace. Its glossy surface seemed to absorb and devour any light that fell on it. All parts of the armor were perfectly fitted to one another, creating an almost seamless barrier of impenetrable steel. Well, not steel yet, stone. The ancient armor looked extremely similar to the one Stone Saint had worn, and now that the shadow was a demon, they were even more alike. The onyx armor in front of Sunny was still more impressive, though, more regal, as if created for a being of a higher status. And just like the armor worn by the saint, it would only transform from actual stone into the miraculous stone-like alloy if risen from its passive state. It couldn't be done yet, though, because its spellweave was damaged. To repair it, the self-restoring properties of the broken memory had to be activated by an infusion of essence, which no one back on the Forgotten Shore could do. Now, however, things were different. Now, Sunny was an awakened. Not only could he control the flow of shadow essence inside his body, he even had the soul serpent to help him guide it. Placing his hands on the cold surface of the onyx breastplate, Sunny closed his eyes and sent the essence into the onyx armor. The shadow essence flowed through the coils of the soul serpent into his left hand, then surged into the cold black onyx. There was no resistance that Sunny had to overcome to transfer it from his body into the stone armor. After all, the armor was his memory, and as such, could be considered to be a part of his soul. The surge of energy rushed through the ancient armament, then returned to his body through his right hand. Soon, a stable cycle was established, with a constant current of shadow essence circulating through both Sunny himself and the onyx armor. It was a strange feeling, as if there was an ethereal river flowing through him, moving endlessly in a circle. Thanks to the shadow guide, attribute of the soul serpent, its current was especially swift and powerful. Soon the onyx armor became saturated by shadow essence. As Sunny watched, it slowly began to change. This was the fundamental trait of both Saint and her armaments, with which the memory shared a common origin. Both were made out of a strange living stone. When imbued with soul energy, the taciturn demon's body turned from stone to bizarre stone-like flesh, while her weapons turned to stone-like steel. Sunny knew this because he had seen the remains of both the original Stone Saint and her fellow stone warrior after they had been defeated by the monstrous iron spiders. After being destroyed, the living statues had turned back into inanimate stone. The memory was transforming right in front of his eyes. Soon, its glossy black surface felt different to the touch. Colder, lighter, more resilient, closer to metal than stone. The living armament had assumed its true form. And now, the most important part. Sunny gazed through the dark metal and peered at the ethereal weave hiding beneath it. The pattern of the diamond string was much more complex and vast than any that he had ever seen, with the exception of the weaver's mask. But then, nothing could compare to that miraculous memory. There were 6 bright embers, serving as anchors for the countless threads of light inside the onyx armor. However, the weave was damaged and chaotic. Thousands of strings were torn and disconnected from the rest of the pattern, breaking its flow and logic. Because of that, the armor couldn't repair itself before. It needed to be imbued with essence and turn from dead stone to enchanted metal for the self-repairing properties that all memories possess to come into effect. And now it was. With an expression of wonder on his face, Sunny observed as the spellweave started to repair itself. The diamond string moved against the invisible winds that had been playing with them before. The torn ends turned whole again. The separated threads became connected to the rest of the pattern once more. Thousands upon thousands of ethereal strings moved in unison, their motions full of strange symmetry and grace. Watching the beautiful weave restore itself filled Sunny with a deep feeling of satisfaction. He smiled. This feels right. He continued to pour essence into the ancient armor and watched as it slowly returned to its intended state. And then it was finally whole once again. With a content sigh, Sonny removed his hands from the breastplate of the onyx armor and retrieved the shadow essence back into his body. After the memory turned back into stone, he dismissed it. After that, not wasting any time, Sonny dove into the soul sea, walked to stand between the two shadow cores, and summoned the memory down. As soon as the silhouette of the ancient armor appeared from the sphere of light, he glanced at the runes surrounding it. "Come on, be good, be great. I've waited for this moment for so long." He read the first string of runes. Memory, mantle of the underworld. Whoa, sounds awesome, but underworld, that word again. One of Saint's abilities was called underworld armament. Her own runes also described the creator of the living statues as residing in the cavernous halls of a dark domain, as well as being the last child of the unknown. Was Saint made by the ruler of the underworld, or something? Sonny shivered slightly, then glanced at the intricate black armor with a solemn expression. Well, if her creator was indeed one of the 7 demons and a sibling to Weaver, the demon of fate, then ruling the underworld might not have been out of the question. Shaking his head, Sonny returned to reading the runes. Memory rank ascended. Memory tier, VI. Memory type, armor. Memory description. Vowing to never look upon the goddess of the black skis again, the prideful demon retreated into the darkness beneath an unassailable mountain chain. He wasn't the first to lead his army against the gods. However, he was the first to shed their blood, as well as learn the secrets of his own. Lead an army against the gods. When teacher Julius mentioned that demons had enough power to wage war against the heavens, Sonny had thought of it as a figure of speech. But maybe it was not. Perhaps a few of them had really tried. And what was that about the secrets of the blood? Endless questions like always. Shaking his head again, Sonny turned away from the description and continued to read. Memory enchantments. Living stone, feather of truth, stalwart, underworld armament, prince of the underworld. Sonny stared at the long list of enchantments for a while, his heart beating wildly in his chest. Can't be. Living stone, enchantment description. This armor can repair itself while being worn. Feather of truth, enchantment description. The weight of this armor can be changed at will. Stalwart, enchantment description. This armor provides extremely high protection against physical attacks, high protection against elemental attacks, and a moderate amount of protection against mind and soul attacks. Underworld armament, enchantment description. This armor can accommodate a charm memory to inherit and enhance its enchantments. Prince of the underworld, enchantment description. This armor grows stronger according to the amount of opponents its wielder defeats. Vanquished foes, 1213/6000. Sonny remained silent for a while. His dark room, which was situated deep underground, was silent for a long time. After a while, he shifted slightly and said in a low voice, "Well, I'll be damned." Sonny sat in the darkness for a while thinking. At first, he wanted to immediately put on his new magnificent onyx armor, but then dismissed that idea. There would be time later. For now, he was too tired. The effects of the stimulant were slowly wearing off, and he had spent too much shadow essence already. He did, however, note a few things about the mantle of the underworld. The first fact he noticed was that it shared 2 enchantments with Saint. However, there were subtle but important differences between the versions of Stalwart and Underworld armament, possessed by the Onyx armor and the Taciturn demon. The memory offered better protection against physical and elemental attacks, but lacked the complete immunity to mind and soul attacks, possessing a moderate amount of protection against those rare and fearsome types of damage instead. Overall, this was an advantageous trade-off, since most nightmare creatures relied on more common ways of destroying awakened. Unless they didn't. The more interesting difference, however, was hidden in the description of the underworld armament. While Saint's armor could accommodate a charm memory to inherit its enchantments, the mantle of the underworld could both inherit and enhance them. Just one word made for so much difference. Sonny couldn't wait to explore this subtle trait of his new memory. Living Stone and Feather of Truth, meanwhile, were pretty obvious. That didn't mean, however, that these enchantments did not have a lot to offer. He could already see many interesting ways to apply both in battle. The downside was that both were active enchantments, and as such, would require a constant flow of essence to function. What's worse, the armor couldn't even be used without activating the first one. But the most interesting enchantment was, without a doubt, Prince of the Underworld. A growing memory. Pondering about that strange and miraculous enchantment, Sonny couldn't help but think about the first lord of the Bright Castle, who had supposedly been the first master of the mantle of the underworld. What tier and rank was the onyx armor when he had first found it? How many of the vanquished foes had been defeated by his hand? Was the mantle of the underworld one of the reasons for his legendary achievements? For the longest time, Sonny had wondered about how an ascended memory of the sixth tier had ended up in the hands of humans in the Dark City. It had to have come from destroying a fallen terror, or so he had thought. Now, there were other possibilities. But all these questions were doomed to be left unanswered, sadly. The First Lord and his companions had taken the answers with them to the grave. Remembering the lonely cairn in the Hollow Mountains, Sonny sighed. Then his thoughts wandered to something else. The goddess of the black skis, Storm God. Teacher Julius had described Storm God as being the deity of the depths, of the oceans, of darkness, stars, travel, guidance, and disaster. He also said that the gender of the gods was subject to change. Stars, darkness, and storms were somewhat related to black skis. Frowning, Sonny remembered the runes describing the mantle of the underworld. Indeed, black skis could also be translated as skis covered by storm clouds or the night sky. Interesting. Translating the runes reminded him of something. Opening his communicator, Sonny found a note he made during his conversation with Effie and Kai. There, their true names were written down in runic language. Nightingale. Kai's true name was pretty simple to understand, but the spell chose to interpret it rather creatively. Even though Sonny had no idea if the dream realm had actual nightingales, the runes described a pretty similar bird, probably. Translated literally, they meant sings beautifully from the night skis, which could mean either enchanting siren of the night or simply a nocturnal bird. Effie's true name was more straightforward, but also far more morbid. Raised by wolves could mean just that, but a more direct translation had a different meaning. Born from wolves or born from being eaten alive. Sonny shivered, then deactivated the communicator and closed his eyes for a second. There was one more thing he could do. Summoning the runes once again, he found the description of Weaver's mask and read. Memory enchantments, mantle of lies, simple trick. Now that he was an awakened, he could try to activate the mysterious enchantment marked by 3 question marks. Even if all of his essence would be only enough to keep it working for a split second, he could. But he was reluctant to. Sonny knew nothing about the enchantment, but from the boundless, inconceivable pattern of the mask's weave, he got a feeling that it was somehow connected to eyes, vision, and sight. He suspected that the vile thieving bird was a cursed devil, at least, and it had been driven mad by just one glance at the reflection in the weaver's eye. Would something similar happen to him? There were things, after all, that humans weren't meant to see. Even gods struggled with looking at some truth, it seemed. No, not now. Sonny was somewhat willing to risk it, but doing so right now would have been really unwise. What if he passed out from shock? That would transport him to a random spot in the dream realm, and knowing his luck, that spot would be populated by horrors beyond imagination. With a sigh, he dismissed the runes and took out another stimulant patch. Some other day, when I am much, much stronger. With that, he removed the old patch and put another one in its place. Time to put all I learned together and make the final decision. What should I choose? Stability or danger? Safer road or an unknown path? 2 days later, Sonny was sitting on a bench opposite the entrance to the Academy Hospital complex with a cup of bitter dark coffee in his hand. In his other hand, he was holding a slick communicator. Taking a sip of the terrible drink, Sonny grimaced, then lingered for a few moments and sighed. Finally, he pressed the call button to contact Master Jet. She answered after a couple of seconds. Her voice sounded a little tense, and there were strange, barely audible whispers mixing with the background noise of the call. Awakened Sunless. What, wait, give me a second. Something crackled violently, and in the next moment the background noise was gone. Much better, so have you decided? Sonny took another sip of coffee and said, Yeah. He hesitated for a bit, then added, As far as joining the legacy clans or the government, I've decided against it. I don't know enough and have no leverage to ensure a good deal. Plus, that option will remain open for me in the future even if I stay independent for now. The reverse, however, won't necessarily be true. In any case, it's a serious matter, one that should not be decided upon in a span of just a few days, while suffering from sleep deprivation and stimulant abuse, to boot. Master Jet turned on the video function of the call and smiled. The smile was bright and beautiful, but Sunny couldn't help but notice that right behind her, something was currently on fire. Makes sense, so then which citadel? That was the real question. While Sunny decided to remain independent for now, while leaving himself an opportunity to join a powerful faction later, his choice of an anchor was going to limit which factions he would be able to interact with later on. He was silent for a bit, then said, Clan Valor territory. Master Jet nodded. Solid choice, Bastion, or a smaller citadel. Sunny drank some more coffee, then spoke the name of the citadel he had chosen into the communicator. Jet's eyes widened slightly. She didn't say anything for a while, then asked with a bit of surprise in her voice, Are you absolutely sure? He nodded. Yeah, I thought about it long and hard. Master Jet stared at him with a slight frown for a few moments, then shrugged. Well, okay then, but that might take a couple of days to arrange. The place is too far north and there's not a lot of saints in those parts, but I'll find a way. Sunny smiled. Thanks, I really owe you one. She smiled in response and then winked at him. Be careful with what you say, Sunless. I might just take you up on the offer and come knocking on your door one day, asking for a favor. He took a sip of coffee and shrugged. Sure, no problem. Oh, and call me Sunny, please, everyone does. Master Jet blinked a couple of times, then grinned. All right. Turning away from the camera, she quickly glanced at something beyond the screen, and then added, Chained Isles, huh? Good luck, Sonny. I hear it's a real hell. In the vast empty darkness, myriads of distant stars were shimmering with ethereal light. The vista of the night sky was boundless and stark, full of promise and mystery. Above it was another sky, this one blue and bright, full of sunlight and gentle winds. White clouds flowed across it, telling enchanting stories with their movement and shapes. Between the bright sky and the dark sky, an island floated in the air. It was surrounded by freely levitating pieces of rock and ancient masonry, its surface awash in the soft radiance of the sun, its underbelly veiled by impenetrable darkness. Several gargantuan chains stretched away from the island, cracking thunderously as it slowly rose and fell. The clangor of iron was almost loud enough to drown Sunny's voice, almost. "Arg, drop-dead bastard, damn you crap." Sonny had a good reason to be screaming bloody murder, because he was seconds away from being eaten alive. Near the edge of the flying island, where the forest covering its surface made way for a narrow expanse of patchy grass, a massive wolf-like beast was currently trying to swallow him whole. The nightmare creature was the size of a small truck, with fur as tough as steel wire and a long, terrifying muzzle. Its jaws were wide enough to bite a human in half, and strong enough to crush both bones and armor into dust. Currently, those jaws were trying to close on Sonny, and the only thing preventing them from doing so were his hands. He held the upper jaw of the beast with one, and the lower jaw with another, trying with all his strength to keep them open. His muscles felt as though they were about to explode. The abomination was also trying to bite down on the hateful human with all of its tremendous might, but for the moment, neither of them could overpower the other. It was just a matter of time, though. Sonny was burning through his essence to augment his physical strength, and those reserves were not endless. When the well of power ran dry, he would lose this contest. Not good. About 2 months had passed after he had chosen to come to this place, and now, Sonny was starting to seriously doubt his decision. Why didn't he just go to Bastion? He would be safe and sound behind its walls right now, maybe even in the embrace of a beautiful. As though trying to add insult to injury, the nightmare creature interrupted his thought by letting out a deafening growl and doubling its efforts to devour him. Sonny felt a putrid wind brush past his face and grimaced miserably. The stench coming out of the beast's maw was unbearable. "Just don't faint." His hands trembled, and the terrible fangs of the beast came a few centimeters closer to sinking into his flesh. Sonny gritted his teeth and then yelled, "Saint, a little help here, damn it." But the taciturn demon was nowhere to be seen. She was a good couple 100 meters away, standing atop a low hill. Sonny groaned and tried to push the jaws of the abomination away, but it was useless. The damn creature was just too strong. A few seconds later, though, something hissed past his shoulders, and 2 menacing black arrows sunk into the feral eyes of the beast. They arrived almost simultaneously. "Thanks." Using the momentary shudder that ran through the wolf's body, Sonny pushed the jaws sideways, allowed them to close with a loud crack, and poured as much essence as he could into a vicious throw. The massive body of the nightmare creature flew for good 10 meters and crashed into a trunk of an ancient oak, plowing straight through and turning it into splinters. Sonny fell to his knees and drew in a shaky breath. Then he quickly glanced back. Far in the distance, a graceful dark silhouette was outlined against the bright sky. Saint held a powerful memory bow in her hands, its limbs made out of horn and polished black wood. 2 ruby eyes burned behind the visor of her helmet, and a crimson coral gem was set into the center of her obsidian breastplate. "Nice shots." She wouldn't be able to help him any further, though, at least not for a dozen seconds. Sonny was pretty sure that the shadow had spent all of her arrows while they were fighting with the pack, and now she had to dismiss and summon them anew. At least the leader of the monstrous wolves was now blind, probably. Not that it was going to stop the bastard. The nightmare creature was already rising from the ground, howling furiously. "Curse you." Panting, Sonny crawled a few steps and picked up the midnight shard. The austere tackeye was as sharp and deadly as ever. The problem was that the last remaining abomination was clearly of the fallen rank, so the stalwart blade was having trouble breaking through its hide. Still, Sonny had to work with what he had. Making sure that the sun was behind him, he stood up and leaned on his sword, watching tiredly as the massive beast turned its ugly head and faced him. The dreadful wolf lowered its muzzle to the ground, then growled with murderous rage. Bits of saliva flew from its maw and fell to the ground. Then, pushing with its mighty hind legs, the nightmare creature lunged at Sonny. Covering the distance between them in an instant, the beast brought its terrible jaws on the tiny human once again, and bit on emptiness. In the place where Sunny stood just a moment ago, there was now nothing but air, light, and shadows. Appearing from the nightmare creature's own shadow, Sunny dove between its hind legs and thrust the midnight shard upward, aiming at the soft belly of the fearsome beast. The tack-eye pierced the pale skin without much problem and sunk into the flesh of the abomination. As blood poured to the ground, the creature staggered and fell. A low whine escaped from its mouth. Very soon it was all over. Falling onto the ground in complete exhaustion, Sunny tried to catch his breath and listen to the silence. Soon, he heard the sweet sound of the spell whispering. "You have slain a fallen monster, dread wolf. Your shadow grows stronger." Sunny lay still for a while, then summoned the runes and looked at the dreadful number. Shadow fragments, 197/2000. He sighed. The task of pursuing power had turned out to be much more difficult than he had anticipated, and for one simple reason. After becoming an awakened, he now received fewer fragments from killing nightmare creatures. If before he could get 2 by slaying an awakened beast, now it was 1. If before he could receive 4 by slaying a fallen beast, now it was 2. What's worse, his hopes of growing strong by hunting down scores of dormant creatures had been mercilessly crushed, because he didn't receive any fragments from killing those weaker than him at all. Which was a real disappointment, who didn't love punching down. Sunny was at the very bottom of the power structure for most of his life, so he had been really looking forward to having an opportunity to bully something weaker than him, for a change. Alas, it had turned out to be a waste of his time. Of course, Sunny had also become tremendously more powerful. He could handle himself in a fight with fallen beasts, and even monsters, especially with the help of Saint. That was the only reason why he had not fallen off behind Nuffaz, who was still alive somewhere in the dream realm and growing more powerful with each day. He had not managed to diminish the gap between them by a lot, but at least he was not worse off than at the start of this. Thinking of changing star, Sunny looked into the distance. A somber expression appeared on his face. Think about something else. There was only one bright side to all of this. While dormant creatures did not bring him any shadow fragments, they did bring him memories, and those memories could be fed to Saint. Her own counter now showed. Shadow fragments, 157/200. Not bad. A low, eerie sound of giant iron links scraping against each other interrupted his thoughts. The island Sunny was currently on seemed to have entered the ascending phase, so his time here was running short. Standing up with a sigh, Sunny summoned the moonlight shard and walked over to the corpse of the dread wolf. He had to retrieve the soul shards before it was too late. The Chained Isles were a strange place. Situated at the very north of the territories claimed by humans, they bordered the Hollow Mountains. That was one of the reasons why Sunny had chosen that region as his hunting grounds. But it wasn't the only one. The whole region consisted of numerous islands that somehow floated in the air, connected to each other by gargantuan iron chains. It was mostly unexplored, and the awakened population here was not very large. Notably, there were not a lot of masters and saints here, especially those associated with the legacy clans, be it great or lesser. What the Chained Island had in abundance instead were the nightmare creatures of all kinds, from dormant ones to awakened, fallen, and terrifying corrupted abominations. Each island had its own menagerie of horrors, and the level of threat differed from one to another. Most were utterly deadly, though, much more deadly than an average awakened was supposed to be able to handle. But Sunny was not an average awakened. To him, this was a perfect hunting ground, a place where he could sharpen his blade without being seen by those who served the sovereigns. Or at least he had thought that way at the start. Right now, He was starting to suspect that it was more of a place where he could die terribly without being seen by anyone who would have been able to help. Just like Master Jet said, the Chained Islands were a hellish land. And not only because of the nightmare creatures. The place itself was capable of killing a person, or rather, its sky could. High above the floating island, there was the usual sky with the sun, the moon, and beautiful stars that shined brightly at night. However, there was another sky in this strange land, the one that was below the islands. It was always dark, and the ethereal lights burning at an unimaginable distance in its vast expanse only looked like the stars. No one really knew what they were. The only thing that humans knew was that the sky below was seemingly endless. On his first day on the Isles, Sonny had asked what was down there. The answer he received was simple. Nothing. Descending into the below was not immediately dangerous, but there was nothing there. Some crazy daredevil had once fought his way through the hunting grounds of nightmare creatures that dwelled beneath the islands and spent a whole week flying straight down. He had to turn back, eventually, because out there in the boundless darkness, his mind began to show signs of breaking apart. Even the winged echo he used to descend into the below had almost gone insane. But other than being absolutely empty, the sky below did not seem to pose a threat. Flying above the Chained Isles, however, was rather deadly. The higher one went, the more crushing their weight would become, until they would either fall down or their body would simply implode. That was why every human on the Chained Isles knew to pay attention to the sound of rattling chains. Every island in the region went through cycles of ascending and descending, and as they rose too high, the pressure on their surface grew tremendously, to the point where it was impossible to move or breathe. Ideally, Sonny had to get off the ascending island before that happened. He should not have been lingering to retrieve the soul shards from the corpses of the monstrous wolves he and Saint had killed, really. But his eyes glistened with avarice. Soul shards meant money, and if there was one thing Sonny really enjoyed, it was making money. No amount was ever enough. An independent awakened like him had a lot of expenses. Fine, it's fine. I'll be off this thing in no time. He quickly cut the dead beasts apart and fished out the soul shards from inside their bodies. Hiding the beautiful crystals in his pack, Sonny hesitated for a little, then sent his essence flowing and tossed the first corpse off the edge of the island. He was planning to come back here soon, and leaving so much meat lying around could make the future visit rather problematic. Sonny only had one more carcass to dispose of when he suddenly noticed a swift silhouette descending from the skis. Commanding Saint to hide herself in the shadows, he summoned the midnight shard and looked up tensely. What the hell? Surrounded by a halo of sunlight, a majestic griffin was quickly approaching the island. At first, Sonny assumed that it was a nightmare creature, but then noticed a human figure on the monster's back. A human rider meant that the magnificent griffin was an echo. Sonny's face grew dim. Very few people could have such an echo on the Chained Isles, and out of those, he was pretty sure that he knew the identity of the unwelcomed visitor. The griffin folded its white wings and dove down, then opened them up near the ground to slow its fall. Sonny raised his hand to cover his eyes from the dust that was sent into the air by the powerful gust of wind. Is strong. The mighty beast shone with ethereal light and disintegrated into a rain of sparks, letting the rider land nimbly on the ground. He regained his balance swiftly and straightened, then turned to Sonny. The man in front of him was tall and had broad, powerful shoulders. He was wearing a light armor crafted from the adamantine scales of an unknown monster, with a blue scarf wrapped carelessly around his neck. His hair was the color of straw, as was his short beard. The stranger's eyes were bright blue and dangerously attentive. Sonny stared at the man for a moment, then bowed respectfully, hiding his face in the process. Master Roan. Indeed, the man in front of him was none other than Ascended Roan of the White Feather clan, one of the only 3 masters on the Chained Isles. Well, there were probably only 3. Unlike the Forgotten Shore, this region of the Dream Realm had several gateways. 2 were found, conquered, and turned into citadels by humans. Both Sonny and Master Roan, as well as pretty much everyone else on the Chained Isles, belonged to one of them, the Sanctuary of Nuktas. That citadel was ruled by the White Feather clan, which was one of the vassal clans to the great clan Valor. The second citadel was rather mysterious. It was situated at the very edge of the region, near the dreaded Hollow Mountains, and belonged to Valor itself. Only those in direct service to the great clan were anchored at its gateway, so Sonny had no idea what went on there, and how powerful the awakened stationed at the citadel were. He did, however, know a bit about Master Roan. The man was married to the only saint on the Chained Isles, after all. Roan looked Sonny up and down, then gave him a friendly smile. "Do we know each other?" Sonny shook his head. "No, sir, we haven't met before. I have just awakened a couple of months ago, so, I am new to the Chained Isles." The strapping master nodded, and then glanced at the carcass of a fallen wolf that Sonny had failed to throw over the edge of the island in time. When Roan turned to him again, there was a measured look in his piercing blue eyes. "Did you kill that beast?" Sonny lingered for a few moments, then nodded. "Yeah, I can be very lucky on occasion." The tall man shook his head. "This is a fallen beast. Ah, you must be Sunless then, from the Forgotten Shore." Sonny smiled. "Curses, he knows my name." He had nothing against the older man, but preferred to remain unknown and underestimated, especially when dealing with legacies. "Yeah, that's me." Master Roan nodded, as though everything suddenly made sense, and then briefly looked at the sky. "You should know that it is dangerous to remain on an ascending island, right? Why are you still here?" Sonny hesitated for a few moments, then shrugged. "I was just about to leave and escape to the next one over when you appeared, sir." The tall man sighed. "Yeah, that's what I figured. You've spent all your luck on that beast, though, it seems. All 3 of the island connected to this one are also ascending. You wouldn't have been able to escape even if you left on time." Sonny stared at him for a while, a sour expression appearing on his face. "Oh, damn it. What about that beautiful griffin of yours, sir? Surely it can bring us both away to safety." Roan grinned. "He is rather beautiful, ain't he? Well, not that it matters. In theory, we can dive below the islands and escape through the sky below, but believe me, you wouldn't want to meet the things that dwell on the dark side of the Isles. Even I prefer to avoid those things." Sonny blinked. "Then what do we do?" The tall man laughed. "I guess you're about to experience your first crushing, Sunless. Don't worry, though. The chains of this island are on the shorter side, so it won't ascend too high, well, most likely. And I'll be here to bring you back to the citadel if you pass out. Provided that we survive, of course." Great. This wasn't Sonny's first crushing, actually, and that was exactly why he didn't want to experience it again. But there was no other choice, it seemed. With a sigh, he dismissed Saint, who had been hiding in the shadows all along, and took off his pack. Then Sonny found a soft-looking patch of grass and placed it on the ground. Behind him, Master Roan dismissed his scale armor and unwrapped his scarf, then tied it around his waist. The less weight was on the human body during the crushing, the easier it was to endure, and the more chances of survival there were. However, the puppeteer's shroud was made mostly out of soft fabric, so Sonny left it on. He also wanted to neither reveal nor dismiss the soul serpent. As the giant chains groaned and rang thunderously, and the island rose higher and higher, the 2 of them lay on the grass and prepared to be crushed. Master Roan stared at Sonny's slender physique, then at his own mighty muscles, and sighed with envy. The Chained Isles was one of the very few places in the dream realm where being small and light was an advantage. If you feel like passing out, turn your head to the side. Wouldn't want to suffocate on your own spit or vomit, right? Sorry for being crass, kid. Sonny grimaced and thanked the older man in a suppressed voice. He was already feeling an invisible force pushing him into the ground. This is going to suck. As if answering his thoughts, the invisible force suddenly grew stronger, crashing into him like a giant hammer. Laying on the soft grass, Sonny felt his body grow heavier and heavier still. The island continued to rise into the sunlit sky, and with each minute the crushing pressure became slightly more unbearable. The ancient forest covering its surface bent, a rain of leaves falling to the ground. The mighty trees lowered their branches, almost as if trying to touch the ground. With a loud crack, a few weaker ones broke and plunged down, showering everything around with sharp splinters. Sonny grimaced, feeling his whole body struggle under the strain. He could still move and breathe without too much trouble, at least for now. Soon, the island would rise high enough to make any kind of movement almost impossible. And if he was especially unlucky, it would continue to ascend, eventually making it hard to even inhale. Hopefully, the chains would draw taut long before that. The skis above the Chained Isles were beautiful, but also forbidden. Nothing could survive their crushing embrace, neither humans, nor nightmare creatures, nor anything else. Well, except for one thing. Shifting his gaze, Sonny looked straight up and found the shape of the ivory tower drifting high above the world, wrapped in a veil of clouds. The ivory tower was the only thing that seemed to be capable of withstanding the deadly pressure of the forbidden sky. It was a tall, magnificent pagoda built out of flawlessly white material that was neither stone nor wood. The island on which it stood was very small, barely wider than the base of the tower itself, and surrounded by drifting slabs of shattered marble. 7 broken chains hung from the soil of the island, swaying as it moved. The ivory tower was visible in the sky both during the day, bathed in sunlight, and at night, glowing beautifully with the reflected radiance of the moon. No one knew what the mysterious structure was, and why it remained untouched by the obliterating force that destroyed everything else that dared to rise above the Chained Isles, since no one had ever managed to withstand the ever-growing crushing to get anywhere near it. Many even believed it to be a mirage. Crap! The island on which Sonny had the misfortune of getting stuck had finally reached the highest point of its ascent and shook violently as the chains connecting it to other isles drew taut. The pressure at this height was torturous, but not deadly. His bones were not breaking under the assault of the crushing, and he could still breathe, even if with great effort. It would have been better if Sonny could wrap the second shadow around his body, but he didn't want to appear too strong in front of Master Roan. Speaking of the devil, the mighty rider chose that exact moment to speak. His voice sounded a little strained. "Hey, Sunless, can you breathe all right?" Sonny gritted his teeth and struggled to speak. In the end, all he could manage was an affirmative grunt. "Good, good. This is actually not that rough as far as crushing goes. If we rose by another 100 meters, though, even I would be having a bad time." Good to know. At this point, Sonny was regretting that they had not climbed on the Griffin and dove into the sky below. The Chained Isles was a dangerous place, and the nightmare creatures living on them were fearsome and powerful beyond belief. However, the creatures living under the islands were much, much worse. Sonny had seen them from afar a couple of times, and the mere memory of those horrors was enough to send a shudder running through his entire body. Still, they could have fought their way through, probably. It would have been better than this diabolical torture, for sure. Arg! But there was nothing he could do now except grit his teeth and endure. Minute after minute, hour after hour. Sonny couldn't even think properly because of how terrible the pressure of the boundless skis was. All he could do was suffer silently and stare at the ivory tower. His shadow, on the other hand, was having a great time. It didn't move, reluctant to get noticed by Master Roan, but he could feel it stare at him gloatingly. "Bastard, I'm going to wrap you around the ordinary rock and make it scream without rest for 24 hours straight. Let's see who's going to be gloating then." The shadow hesitated for a bit, then awkwardly pretended to be interested in something else and looked away. "Yeah, that's right." Somewhere in the forest, another tree exploded with a loud crack. Sonny tried to turn his head to look in that direction, but it demanded too much effort. He didn't have to worry about being attacked by nightmare creatures in this helpless state anyway. They were currently hiding in their lairs, enduring the crushing the same way he was. Who could fight under this hellish pressure? Sonny felt as if there was a mountain on his chest. Every breath demanded his utmost effort to make. His whole being ached, and his vision had become blurry. Exhausted, he closed his eyes and circulated the shadow essence through the coils of the soul's serpent to keep his slowly breaking body going. Damn it, I'll be late to wake up, won't I? When were they going to call in the morning? Such an important call, and I'm about to miss it. He was starting to feel really hurt when the blessed sound of rattling chains finally reached his ears once again. Oh, thank gods! After about 4 hours, the island had finally begun to move again, entering its descent phase. Little by little, the crushing pressure began to grow weaker. Master Roan sighed with relief by his side. "The worst part is over. Just wait a little bit more, kid. You're almost there." Sonny glanced at the older man and sighed. He used to hate it when people called him kid, but not anymore, at least not as much. He just felt a little wistful. He didn't feel like a kid, not for a long time now. Not since coming back from the Forgotten Shore. A dozen long and torturous minutes later, the island descended enough for them to move, and then slowly stand up. The crushing was over. Sonny slowly rolled on his stomach, then rose to his knees. He was breathing heavily, and his whole body felt as if it had just gone through a meat grinder. Master Roan, on the other hand, looked almost unperturbed. The rider was already on his feet, tying the blue scarf around his neck with a relaxed expression on his face. The forest around them let out an almost human sigh of relief. The ancient trees creaked and cracked, raising their branches back toward the sun. Those that had broken remained on the ground, adding to the nearly impenetrable layer of deadfall. Sonny glanced at the older man with a bit of envy, then stood up and tried to shake off his exhaustion. After spending a few minutes resting and drinking greedily from the endless spring, he almost felt alive again. Glancing at the tall man, he asked, "How are you able to fly up there on your griffin? I mean, no offense, but that seems like something only a crazy person would do." Roan laughed. "I don't rise too high unless I really have to. Usually, you can fly above the descending islands without experiencing too much pressure. After a while, you develop a sense of how much your body can handle and for how long." He massaged his broad shoulders and added, a note of pride in his voice, "Plus, I am a master after all. I can withstand much more than an awakened would. You did exceptionally well, however. To be honest, I was pretty sure that I would have to abandon my patrol to bring your bleeding body back to the sanctuary at full speed, then throw it into the gateway. I guess it's true what they say about you Forgotten Shore kids." Sonny blinked a couple of times and asked cautiously, "What do they say?" The older man smiled. "Tough as nails, disturbingly indifferent to pain and fear, strong, almost scary. Scary children, that was the exact phrase I heard." Sonny lingered for a few moments, then scoffed. "Indifferent to pain and fear? What nonsense! I pride myself on being a coward as one should. What's wrong with being a coward? Fear keeps people alive while bravery gets them killed. As for pain, no thank you. I have been beaten, burned, crushed, drowned, cut, stabbed, pierced, bitten, chewed, and gutted enough times for several lifetimes already. As Master Roan gave him a strange look, Sonny raised an eyebrow. What?" The tall man shook his head, then scratched his chin and said in a wondering tone, "No, nothing, it's just. If that is true, Sunless, then what are you doing here on the Chained Isles? Shouldn't you be having a nice time in a safe place like Bastion?" Sonny looked away in embarrassment, then coughed. There are several reasons for that, actually, not the least of which is that." He looked side to side, then lowered his voice and said in a gravely serious tone, "You won't believe it, but the government actually pays you money for writing down things about the Dream Realm. And since the Chained Isles are largely unexplored, they pay me premium for going around dusty ruins here and scribbling down a thing or two. I am technically a contracted researcher, believe it or not." He grinned and watched as Master Roan stared at him with an incredulous expression. After a while, the older man said, "You are a strange fellow, you know that." Sonny shrugged. Everyone knows that, I think. Anyway, don't tell anyone about what I've just said. I don't want the competition." The tall man blinked a couple of times, then smiled. "No problem. Do you need me to take you back to the sanctuary, or will you be fine returning on your own?" Sonny thought for a bit, then said, "I'll be fine. It's not that far anyway. If I make haste, I'll be back before morning and go straight back to the real world. I have business to attend to there, actually." Master Roan nodded and patted Sonny on the shoulder. "All right, then I'll be on my way. It's been nice meeting you, Sunless. If you need anything in the future, don't hesitate to find me in the sanctuary." With that, he summoned his echo. A sea of white sparks appeared out of thin air and swirled, slowly turning into the figure of the mighty griffin. The winged beast towered above Sonny like a gargantuan mix between a lion, an eagle, and a pure nightmare. Slowly, it lowered its head, staring at him with two beautiful, inhuman eyes. Its beak looked about as fearsome and terrifying as that of a spire messenger. Sonny tensed a little and took a couple of steps back, prepared to dissipate into the shadows at any moment. He didn't really think that Master Roan would suddenly attack him, but being paranoid was better than being dead. The tall man summoned his armor, then easily jumped on the griffin's back and raised a fist to bid Sonny farewell. In the next moment, the echo stretched its wings and pushed itself off the ground, sending a squall of hurricane wind in all directions. Sonny struggled to remain on his feet, and then looked as the griffin flew into the distance. Slowly, a friendly expression disappeared from his face. Well, what do you know? The famed master had turned out to be a rather pleasant person. Granted, he was a legacy by marriage, and not by birth. Still, Sonny had expected to be treated with a lot more disdain and contempt, at best hidden behind a mask of false courtesy. Come to think of it, the saint governing the Chained Isles herself was pretty down to earth, if a bit cold. Not that Sonny had a lot of opportunities to interact with her after that first day when she had brought him to the sanctuary. With a sigh, he walked over to the carcass of the monstrous wolf and sent it flying over the edge of the island with a frustrated push. The corpse of the abominable beast plummeted down and soon disappeared into the darkness of the sky below. Making sure that nothing appeared from beneath the island to snatch it, Sonny lingered on the edge for a couple of minutes, then sighed, and jumped into the bottomless abyss himself, falling through the boundless blue skies with the wind whistling in his ears. Sonny threw his hands to the sides and summoned the dark wing. As the translucent memory weaved itself from light behind his back, he shifted his weight and allowed the air resistance to push him off course, effectively turning left. A few seconds after that, he activated the enchantment of his cloak and slowed down his fall, simultaneously turning the downward momentum into a forward push. In these past 2 months, Sonny had become somewhat proficient in navigating the sky. Cutting a smooth arc in the air, he swiftly approached one of the gargantuan chains connecting the forest island to another, flew above it for a few minutes, and landed nimbly on one of the massive links. The giant chain swayed lightly beneath his feet. Somewhere behind him, it rose and merged with the soil of the island. In front of him, there was a vast expanse of empty heavens. Here on the border to the sky below, it was currently twilight. The chain stretched into the distance, disappearing into the darkness of the void a few hundred meters away. As the dark wing turned from a blur back into a transparent cloak, Sunny sighed and walked forward. Each link of the heavenly chain was as wide as a road, so he didn't need to be afraid of falling off. Approaching the connection between two links, Sunny either jumped down or glided up to the next one. Walking across the length of the chain that was drawn between the bottomless abyss below and the boundless sky above, he soon left the light of the sun behind and entered into the eternal darkness of the below. Here, there was no wind and no sound, only silence. If not for the swaying of the chain, Sunny would have thought that he had entered a completely new world. A myriad of ghostly lights were burning somewhere far below, pretending to be stars. Making sure that no one was watching him, Sunny lingered for a few moments, and then dove into the iron surface of the chain. His body turned into an incorporeal shadow and merged with the darkness enshrouding it. Here in the sky below, he was in his natural element after all. Sunny couldn't travel through the empty darkness itself, but the chains were covered by an impenetrable veil of shadows. He could swim through them for as long as he had essence to spare, safe from the terrible creatures that lived on the dark side of the chained isles. Rushing forward with terrible speed, Sunny slid over the surface of the chain and flew through the darkness like a ghost. He went faster and then faster still, circling around the chain several times and leaving the forest island far behind, covering the distance to the next isle in mere minutes. He escaped from the shadows the moment the sunlight touched the iron chain once again and shot upward in a spin. The dark wing turned into a blur, pushing him even further up. Sunny soared above the floating island and then glided smoothly to its surface, landing on solid ground with a light step. This one was much different from the one where he had fought the monstrous wolves. Instead of a forest of twisted trees, the isle was covered by jagged rocks, with an ancient ruin standing lonesomely in its center. Sunny had explored the massive structure already, and wasn't interested in visiting it again. Jumping from one shadow to another, he avoided the nightmare creatures populating the island and soon approached its other edge. Technically, from here, he only needed to cross 2 more isles to reach the sanctuary. However, one of those isles was home to a dreadful and utterly terrifying corrupted monster, so he was going to have to make a big detour. Sunny looked at the sun, and then jumped off the edge once again. Just like that, he traveled from one island to another for a few hours. When possible, Sunny turned into a shadow and rushed along the lengths of heavenly chains, then emerged from the darkness and traversed the islands themselves on foot. Each island was different from another. Some were desolate and bleak, some covered by grass and vegetation. One was full of beautiful white flowers, while another hid a clear, tranquil lake. A few were covered by ash and flames, while several were covered by the ruins that some ancient civilization had left behind. If there was one thing that united all of them, it was that each was dangerous in its own way. The desolate islands were home to swarms of monstrous, gluttonous ants. The grass covered the maws of giant abominations that hid beneath, waiting for prey to step into their trap. The vegetation was predatory and deadly if one wasn't careful to not get too close. The beautiful white flowers could put a person to sleep from which they would never wake up. The tranquil lake was home to a creature so terrifying that Sunny did not even dare to approach its clear waters. And these ones were on the safer side as far as the chained isles went. Due to their proximity to the sanctuary, they were well explored, and anything dangerous enough to pose threat to the citadel had long been destroyed by St. Tyrus herself. Sunny had been to these islands already too, so he knew his way around them. Each was either descending or ascending. The former were easier to cross, while the latter forced him to walk while suffering from the early stages of the crushing. If an island he wanted to use was too high, Sunny had to change his plan and seek out another way. After a while, his reserve of shadow essence became dangerously low. Knowing that he will have to make a stop, Sunny chose a relatively safe island and headed toward it. Gliding to the surface, Sunny tiredly dismissed the dark wing and looked around. The island he was currently standing on was rather close to the sanctuary, and usually empty of any nightmare creatures. However, it was wise to make sure. Sending his shadows in different directions to scout for potential danger, Sunny sat on the ground and summoned the endless spring. When his thirst was satiated, he crossed his legs, put his hands on his knees and closed his eyes, concentrating on the coils of the soul serpent. With a part of his mind observing the world through the shadows and another concentrated on hastening the accumulation of shadow essence, he meditated for a while, and then suddenly opened his eyes. One of the shadows had noticed something interesting. The island Sunny was resting on was a strange one. It was rather large and covered in soft grass, with ancient stone columns protruding from the ground here and there. Most of them had long toppled and been shattered to pieces by some unknown disaster. The ground itself was full of depressions and generally uneven, as if it had served as a battlefield for giants once. The reason why Sunny had come up with such a metaphor was not coincidental. The main feature of the island was situated at its center and appeared to be a giant, rusty metal hand. Hence, the isle was unimaginatively called the Iron Hand Island. It was well known to the awakened anchored in the sanctuary because very few nightmare creatures ever came here, and thus, many humans used it to rest during their journeys. However, today, Sunny wasn't the only visitor to the peaceful island. A rather ugly monstrosity lay dead in the shadow of the giant iron hand, its blood forming a large pool. It had a body like that of a snake, two powerful hands protruding from a human-like torso, a head with a long and toothy muzzle, and two leathery wings. From the looks of it, the creature had landed on the island due to heavy injuries, and then succumbed to the most recent crushing. Its body seemed broken and flattened, with sharp bone splinters protruding from the torn scales. Sunny's interest was naturally piqued, because it wasn't every day that he stumbled on free soul shards. Additionally, and more intriguing, the shadow had noticed something glinting on the ground near one of the abomination's hands. Huh. Standing up, Sunny looked around, and then headed to the center of the island. Soon, he reached the rusty metal arm and dove into the shadows, emerging on top of it. Standing a good 10 meters above the ground, he stared at the carcass of the dead nightmare creature to make sure that the shadow didn't miss anything. Everything seemed to be fine. With a shrug, Sunny jumped down and landed softly on the grass near the massive monster. Walking around it, he approached the spot where the abomination's hand lay on the ground, its 5 long fingers ending in terrifying claws. "Gee, you were a scary one, weren't you?" He didn't need to wonder about who had done the monster in. On the chained isles, nightmare creatures constantly fought each other. Winged ones like this one were often caught by the inhabitants of the dark side, torn to pieces and devoured. This one had been relatively lucky, all things considered. Bending down, Sunny picked up the small object that seemed to have fallen out of the creature's hand and stared at it with a dubious expression. The coin. Indeed, he was holding a heavy golden coin, which didn't make any sense. Nightmare creatures were not exactly known for participating in commerce, and humans did not use coins. If they needed to trade, they either bartered with suitable items or used credits, of course. Credits didn't exist in the dream realm, but the transaction would be honored when both parties returned to the real world. So where could a gold coin come from? Sonny stared at the coin for a while, then turned it around. There was a depiction of an archaic ship on one of its sides, with a tall mast that had an actual tree growing around it. A beautiful human face stared at him from the other side, a carefree smile on its lips. The person had high cheekbones, long hair, and exquisite features. Sonny couldn't say if they were a man or a woman, just that they seemed rather charming. There was a crescent moon drawn on their forehead, and well, that was about it. Sonny studied the coin some more, and then thought despondently, "That thing is definitely cursed, right? It just had to be." What else was he supposed to think after finding a mysterious coin near the corpse of a monster that had died a violent death? But it didn't seem to be cursed. Sonny had a rather good intuition about these things. He also had the sight of a person who had inherited a part of Weaver's forbidden lineage. Looking under the surface of the coin, Sonny expected to see a malevolent spellweave, or at least something strange, but there was nothing. From the looks of it, the coin was just a coin. The only strangeness about it was that it seemed a little bit warm to the touch. Huh. Teacher Julius would have been delighted if he brought him a sketch of a genuine Dream Realm coin. Cultural artifacts like this were few and far between. It wouldn't result in Sonny receiving any contribution points, but the old man was easy to please. With a shrug, Sonny shoved the coin into his pack and turned to the dead monster. "Let's see how many shards you're hiding, ugly lizard." He summoned the moonlight shard, enhanced it with 2 shadows, and cut into the tough hide of the nightmare creature. For a while, luck was on his side. He quickly retrieved 2 bright soul shards, so quickly, in fact, that Sonny grew sure that there had to be a third one inside the carcass. A demon, huh? That was where his luck ended. The body of the demon was too heavily damaged, so when he tried to fish out the third crystal, its stomach burst open and spilled its contents all over the ground. Arg curses. Sonny was so disgusted by the idea of being doused in the putrid slimy mass that he instinctively teleported a few meters away. Then he tilted his head and stared down. Covered in repulsive, acidic liquid, 3 more coins, as well as something that resembled a piece of a wooden chest, lay in the quickly melting grass. Did this guy try to eat a treasure chest? Sonny shook his head, walked around the disgusting mess, and quickly retrieved the last soul shard. Since golden coins were rather useless to him, and he already had one to sketch, he had no intention of retrieving the rest. No thank you. By that time, he had recovered enough shadow essence to return to the sanctuary, so nothing was holding him on the island anymore. Throwing one last look at the giant metal hand, and wondering what terrible strike could have separated it from the rest of the theoretical giant, he turned away and walked toward the edge of the island. The sun was already setting, so he didn't have a lot of time left to return to the citadel and use the gateway before the morning came. Soon, Sonny was walking on the last chain he had to traverse as he approached the sanctuary of Noctis. By then, it was already night. Up above, the pale disk of the crescent moon shone softly, its light reflecting off the white walls of the ivory tower. Countless stars shimmered on the dark velvet tapestry of the night sky. Without the light pollution that the giant city where Sonny had grown up produced, they were beautiful and bright. There had not been any stars on the Forgotten Shore, as well, so this sight was still new and breathtaking to him. Now that it was night, the border between the sky above and the sky below was almost invisible. The empty void beneath the isles had stars of its own, so it seemed like the reflection of the real sky during these hours. The only difference between them was that it lacked both the moon and the ethereal silhouette of a graceful white tower floating through the clouds. The chain swayed lightly as Sonny walked. He felt reluctant to use shadow step this close to the sanctuary, and enjoyed the sight of the night sky, the smell of clean air, and the cool embrace of the wind. So he tended to complete this last part of the return journey on foot. Even hell could be beautiful sometimes. A few minutes later, Sunny heard the murmur of flowing water and knew that the sanctuary was already close. The citadel that served most awakened of the chained isles as home was situated on a tiny island of its own. That island, however, was rather anomalous. Unlike all others, it never rose and never fell, always remaining at a stable height, away from the torturous pressure of the crushing. There was a grass field, and in its center, massive menhirs stood in a perfect circle, which encompassed another, smaller one. This larger circle formed the outer wall of the citadel, while the smaller one formed the inner. Inside the circle, there was a tranquil park with a pool of clear water in its middle. A path of stones led to a small island at the center of the pool, where, in the shade of an ancient tree, an altar cut from a solid piece of white marble stood. The altar had three special things about it. The first one was an obsidian knife that lay on its surface. The knife did not seem very special, with the exception of the fact that no one, not even saints, could lift it even by a centimeter from the altar's surface. The second special thing about the altar was that it appeared to be, itself, the gateway. One simply had to touch it to be transported back to the real world. Once anchored to it, the awakened would appear near the altar when they fell asleep in reality. The third thing was that a seemingly endless stream of water flowed from the altar, feeding the pool that surrounded it. No one knew where the water came from or why the altar produced it, just that it was cold, sweet, and safe to drink. 7 streams flowed out of the pool and eventually fell over the edges of the small island, turning into water mist in the wind. On a bright day, the whole sanctuary was surrounded by rainbows. It was the murmur of these waterfalls that Sunny had heard as he approached the citadel. Using the dark wing to glide upward and land on the soft grass of the island, he walked over to a stone post that stood nearby and rang the bronze bell that hung on it. This was to let the watchman know that he was a human and not a nightmare creature that needed to be destroyed. Soon, a whistle came out of the darkness, and Sunny walked forward on a path that led to the towering menhirs. A few minutes later, he had walked between 2 massive stones and entered the sanctuary of Noctis. No one really knew who Noctis was, and why this place was called in their honor, if that name even belonged to a living creature. It was just what the spell called this place, so humans followed suit. In any case, the space between the 2 rings of menhirs had been made into a place for the awakened to rest and recuperate between their ventures into the wild expanse of the chained isles. The White Feather clan had built walls to close the spaces between the standing stones, and recruited several people with useful utility aspects to make living conditions better for those who chose to come here, or were sent to this region by the spell. Currently, there were about 200 awakened populating the sanctuary, which was enough to keep it functioning and safe. This late at night, most people were either sleeping, resting, or had already returned to the real world, so Sunny did not meet anyone as he headed toward his assigned living quarters. Like everybody else here, he was assigned a small room after becoming anchored to the sanctuary. It was situated near one of 2 entrances, so he didn't have to walk for a long time. Entering the room, Sunny quickly took off his pack and placed his trophies, a scattering of soul shards, a few weird-looking fruits and the golden coin, into a chest standing near the bed. Then he threw the pack on the floor, lingered for a few moments, and left. Usually, he would have stayed until the morning and went to either the kitchens or the improvised marketplace at the park to trade the shards for memories or credits, chat with other awakened to learn the latest news and important information about the Isles, or simply relax. But today, he had to hurry to the real world. Entering the park, Sunny approached the deep pool of clear water and stepped onto the first stone of the path that led to the altar island. Soon, he was standing in front of the white altar, surrounded by the tranquil sound of rustling leaves and running water. Glancing at the obsidian dagger, Sunny resisted the urge to try and lift it. He had already done so many times before, all with no result whatsoever. Maybe one day. With a sigh, he took a step forward and placed his hand on the altar. The marble felt cool to the touch. In the next moment, the darkness of the night was momentarily illuminated by a flash of ethereal blue light. When it dissipated, there was no one standing under the branches of the ancient tree. Sunny had left the dream realm and returned to the real world. Sunny opened his eyes in the cool cradle of the sleeping pod. The lid was already sliding away, and the lights in the room were gradually turning brighter. The panoramic wall in front of him opened to a view of one of the academy parks. The eastern horizon was already painted lilac by the rising sun, but the world was still shrouded in darkness. I made it. With a sigh, he rose from the pod and lowered his feet to the cold floor. These first moments after leaving the dream realm were still strange to him. It just seemed weird to be able to escape it so easily, without having to fight through a sea of monsters and struggle against terror, desperation, and pain. How could something so meaningful be so simple? And yet it was. In the past 2 months, coming and going from the dream realm had almost become a routine for him. Not that he had done it as often as most awakened did. Standing up, Sunny grimaced, then massaged his shoulders and glanced at the sleeping pod darkly. Now that he was an awakened, the academy had granted him a personal living space in one of the dormitories. These quarters were much the same as the room he had lived in during his preparations to enter the dream realm for the first time, but with one significant difference. There was a smaller room adjacent to the main one, housing a humble meditation space and an individual sleeping pod. The problem was, that pod was not at all as advanced and state-of-the-art as the ones used for the sleepers. It did its job fine as long as an awakened remained in the dream realm for about 8 to 12 hours, as most of them did. However, Sunny was in the habit of spending much more time there. His recent adventure, for example, had lasted 3 whole days. He had to work hard to not fall behind, after all. As a result, his muscles felt sore and heavy. Circulating essence through his body to chase away the remnants of sleep, Sunny walked to the bathroom and got into the shower. As streams of water caressed his skin and flowed down the scales of the black serpent coiling around his lithe body, he sighed and closed his eyes for a moment. At least his mind felt refreshed. Visiting the dream realm was not exactly equal to good sleep, but it was somewhat similar. Mental fatigue still accumulated little by little, but it was easy to remove by meditating or actually sleeping on the other side of the gateway. Few awakened ever did, however, since no place there was really completely safe. Exiting the shower sometime later, Sunny finally felt wide awake and full of energy. He dressed himself, sat at the table, and quickly compiled a report about his recent exploration. Then, he picked up the communicator and checked its log. No missed calls. A few messages from Uffa with photos of all the delicious food she was eating and several mimetic jokes of questionable nature. And a few more from Ka, describing his experiences in Bastion. Sunny waited for a bit, then sighed and put the communicator down. Time for breakfast. Commanding one of the shadows to wrap itself around his body so that he appeared like a normal person, Sunny left his room and headed out. On the way to the cafeteria, he met a few other awakened. No one paid him too much attention, though. In recent months, the images and true names of Cassie, Ka, and especially Uffa had been plastered all over the media, but luckily, he had avoided becoming a poster boy for the government's insatiable propaganda machine. As the result, random strangers had no idea who he was, which suited Sunny just fine. Entering the cafeteria, he got himself a full tray of food, sat at one of the tables, and placed the communicator on its surface. The call was supposed to come any minute now. He enjoyed a decadently delicious breakfast in peace and quiet, glancing at the communicator from time to time. No one bothered him, and there was no danger to be worried about. A content smile found its way to his lips. Ah, life is good. Finally, the communicator rang. Sonny answered the call and listened to the respectful voice on the other side of it. Everything is ready. Wonderful, so when can I? Oh, really? Well, great. Then I will be there at noon, right? See you later, then. Finishing the call, he put the communicator down and stared into the distance for a long time, a strange look on his face. After receiving the contribution points for his Forgotten Shore report and making some money by selling soul shards to other awakened on the Chained Isles, Sonny had done something that he had never thought that he would be able to do in this life. He had bought a home. A nice, beautiful home in the district of the city, with clean air and green lawns. And now, after several long weeks of waiting, everything was finally ready for him to move in. Looking down at his cantankerous shadow, Sonny lingered for a few moments, and then smiled. I think we've made it, buddy. We really, really did. The person in charge of renovating his home and bringing it to the desired specifications was going to meet him there at noon, so Sonny had a few hours of free time to kill. He wandered around the parks for a bit. Now that the spring had come, the air was warm and pleasant. The melodic drip-drop of melting snow disturbed the peaceful silence of the early morning, making Sonny feel balanced and relaxed. Even the shadow seemed to enjoy this tranquil landscape. Eventually, he visited one of the kiosks scattered around the academy and spent a bit of credits to buy a bouquet of fresh flowers. Then, Sonny found himself standing in front of the hospital complex. With a sigh, he lowered his head and walked through the automatic doors. Using an elevator to reach one of the lowest levels, he passed several increasingly strict security checks and approached an unremarkable white door. Inside it was cool and dark. Changing the withered flowers with fresh ones, he lingered for a bit, then sat on a chair that stood near the softly glowing sleeping pod. Entombed within, a young woman with silver hair was dreaming soundly, her face pale and unmoving. Hey, Nuffas, how have you been? Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of us.